Good Thursday evening, everybody. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandages here with your tropical update, and we now have PTC number 13, Potential Tropical Cyclone, that has a 100% chance, according to the National Hurricane Center, of becoming our next named storm. That next name on the list is Julia, the 10th of the season. Today is Thursday, October the 6th. 2022. So what's changed since we last spoke yesterday? Well, what was once Invest 91L, a tropical wave, has now been designated as a potential tropical cyclone. And what that means, it doesn't really change its status. It's no stronger than it was as a tropical wave, but now it is impacting land. We've had 4 PTCs so far this year in 2022. Alex, Bonnie, then PTC number 4 that failed to develop, and now we've got 13. Now, no latitude has been gained. It's no northerly component to its track so far. It's moving due west. That means there's lots of land interaction that has kept it weak and has put a cap on it really intensifying or organizing so far. That's likely not going to be the end of the road, though, as we go forward in time. It's already been very impactful, too. Flooding in Trinidad and Tobago yesterday. The ABC Islands are dealing with it right now. Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao getting some flooding downpours and some gusty winds as well. Let's refresh ourselves on exactly what a PTC is, a potential tropical cyclone. It basically describes a system that does not satisfy the definition of a tropical cyclone: close center of circulation, winds of 39 miles per hour or greater, and numerous other boxes that need to be checked. But, however, it does pose a threat to land within 48 hours, and it enables, most importantly, the Hurricane Center to give us a forecast cone and to issue watches and warnings for those areas that will be affected from this storm as it moves farther to the west. So there's been a lot of tropical cyclones issued. In fact, this is a relatively new practice implemented by the National Hurricane Center back in 2017. And we're very heavy on the PTC button then. We had 7 systems get a PTC designation, but there have been several notable storms that started out as a potential tropical cyclone. Harvey and Maria in 2017. In 2018, Florence and Michael. Michael was a Category 5. And back in 2020, the most active season on record, Isaias started off as a PTC. And again, so far this year, we've had 4. So here's a look at PTC 13. Looks very disheveled. That is the northern coast, the Caribbean coast of Venezuela. There's Colombia right here. Infrared satellite imagery doesn't really show much in the way of organization from the convective activity, the thunderstorm activity present on satellite right now. However, if we strip away the satellite imagery and look down below the hood, what the surface winds are doing, we see that we probably have that box checked for a closed center of circulation. You can see that here moving in the water south of the ABC Islands and just off the northern coast of Venezuela there, which is why that 100% chance of it developing here within the next 48 hours of getting that designation as Tropical Storm Julia. Now, the only other box that remains unchecked is if it has strong enough winds, tropical storm force winds, to get that upgrade to a designation of tropical storm. And recon aircraft currently in the storm as we record this video just clocked a wind speed of tropical storm force winds, 39 miles per hour there. So we are on the cusp of seeing this get the upgrade to Tropical Storm Julia, probably before this evening is up. Very familiar area here, especially for this season. Low riders are what we call them, low latitude storms that interact with land, the northern coast of South America. So we started off the season with Bonnie in June. That was a similar track here. You can see that track in the yellow. Bonnie also got the PTC designation, but really failed to develop until it was just ahead of landfall in Nicaragua as we headed into the later parts of June. Now, the overall climatological setup was much different back then. The Caribbean wasn't very favorable for development at that time. Much different this time around, because once it moves away from that land interaction, PTC 13, it will likely develop with very favorable conditions for a relatively small window of time, though, so it likely won't get as strong. In fact, most likely won't get as strong as Ian did. You can see Ian's track here. We talked about a lot of similarities of where this originally developed when it was moving through the Windward Islands, because it basically mimicked the exact location and satellite signature that Ian had when it was Invest 98L. But those similarities have now ended, as we saw Ian took that northerly track, was over the warm, deep waters of the central and western Caribbean, and really took advantage of that for some rapid intensification. Land interaction here has kept 13, very, very weak so far. You can see its current location. There's the ABC Islands getting some wind and some rain from this, just scooting over the waters over the northern coast of Venezuela. So the center is depicted as being over water, despite most of its convection being strewn out over the land areas of northern Venezuela at this time. Warm waters lie ahead of it. That's never really been a problem for any system so far this season. It's really been the dry air in place in the mid-levels and some wind shear, both of which we do not have as this goes forward. So that window of time is going to be when it's over the southern Caribbean, southern western Caribbean for the warm, deep water here, because the ocean heat content, although not as high as what you'd find a little farther north, the same area that Ian moved through, there's certainly plenty of deep, warm water for it to work through and plenty of energy available for it to take advantage of to become what's forecast to be a Category 1 storm at this time. So here's the forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. Again, that PTC designation allows the Hurricane Center to put out that forecast cone for us to give us a feel for where it is going. Scoots the northern coast of Colombia as we head through the overnight tonight. And in fact, by 1 a.m. Friday, it is a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm getting the name Julia. Moves west, away from land into warm, conducive environmental conditions for it to develop. And then here we go by this weekend. Sunday, 1 a.m., it peaks at a hurricane Category 1 status. 85-mile-an-hour winds. That looks to be where it will likely make landfall as. Of course, intensification is one of the hardest things to forecast with hurricane development here, so it could certainly be a little bit stronger than that. Here's a look at the spaghetti plots. Going forward in time, there is good clustering or good consensus from the majority of our computer models, taking it on a due westerly track towards the coast of Nicaragua by this weekend. But then as we go farther out in time, take note of what happens here. A diversion here, or disperses in terms of the divergence, I should say, of where the models go. Some take it over land, weakening it, and then taking it into the southern Bay of Campeche, southern Gulf of Mexico. Others bring it out into the Pacific, which, if you remember, that's exactly what happened with Bonnie. It made landfall as a tropical storm and then went into the Pacific, a cross-basin storm, as we call it, very rare to occur, and became a Category 3 hurricane in the eastern Pacific. Could that happen again with what will be Julia? It's a possibility if it holds its low-level circulation or mid-level circulation together. But over land here, it'll rain itself out, and if it does survive, it could make it into the southern Bay of Campeche. That cannot be ruled out. So what's driving its track basically due west? Well, it's a dominant area of high pressure, a ridge set up that blocks any northerly trend to this at all, which is why it's moving due west and will so until it gets to Nicaragua this weekend. Then, as you see here, by the middle of next week, that ridge does build farther to the east, allowing the potential of maybe a weakness to develop here, which is why some of the computer plots do trend it off to the northwest through the Yucatan and potentially into the southern Bay of Campeche. Very far out in time, but that's still a possibility as we go farther out into next week. Here's a look at the GFS ensemble, the 30-member ensemble mode here. Each model here, you tweak the variables just a little bit to get a different outcome. And that shows a similar spread as we get farther out in time. A considerable amount take it to the northwest, a considerable amount take it pretty much due west still into the eastern Pacific Basin. Now, areas that are already seeing impacts from this is northern Colombia, Venezuela, the ABC Islands, Trinidad and Tobago just got through some of that heavy rainfall yesterday, so impacts are happening there now. Areas that need to monitor the forecast for likely impacts are Central America, most importantly Nicaragua, with all of our global models pretty much aligned with a landfalling hurricane there this weekend. On top of that, heavy tropical rainfall. These are tropical systems. They rain themselves out. Computer models here over the ABC Islands have put out anywhere from 5 to 8 inches of rain, and all of that, especially with an intensifying storm drawing more moisture out of the oceans, will bring at least a foot of rain likely in some of these areas in Central America, leading to the threat for flash flooding and mudslides as well. On top of that will be the wind. The arrival of at least tropical storm force winds looks to get to Central America, the Nicaraguan coast, by Sunday morning at 8 a.m. And the potential's there, too, of even seeing some hurricane force winds in some areas. In fact, look at the wind field from our forecast models here. Here it is currently. Again, tropical storm force winds may be in some of the outlying convection. Starts to get its act together as we approach this weekend, and by Sunday, pre-dawn hours, we're starting to see an intensification happening. This will likely have a burst of intensification right before making landfall, and that's indicated here, because look, we jumped to 8:30 on Sunday morning. We all of a sudden see Category 1 hurricane force winds, 74 to 95 miles per hour, jump up just ahead of landfall here, but notice those winds stay offshore. Then it builds inland, and that wind field expands and disperses, and it begins to rapidly weaken as it's away from its fuel source. Here's a look at the computer models. Going forward in time, through tomorrow morning, we start to see it clear any land interaction. As it's out into the open environment for conducive development, we really start to see it get its act together. Developing here, becoming a little bit more prominent as a tropical storm and eventually a Category 1 hurricane. And by Sunday morning at 6 a.m., there's that landfall on the Nicaraguan coast, potentially as a higher end Category 1 hurricane, certainly not out of the realm of possibility. That's the latest now on PTC 13, likely going to become Tropical Storm Julia. Before we talk next, tomorrow in our next video. Until then, if you have any questions, you can find me on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and I'm also on TikTok at TimTalkWeather. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.